The optics played a bad stereotypes about Africa. Men in fatigues holding the deposed president who's outlasted his stay. In 2010, Alpha Conde became Guinea's first civilian president to win through the ballot box. If the once courageous opposition leader in the end lost his way when he saw fit to lift term limits to hang on to powers, we'll be asking about that and the new strongman in Conakry, former French legionnaire Mamadi Doumbouya, a colossus who spoke to France 24 draped in the Guinean flag. What to make of his promise of a swift transition? What to make of the spate of coups in other former French colonies recently, Mali, Chad, and now in a nation that's resource-rich in water, forests, precious minerals, but beset by poverty, mismanagement, and ethnic rivalries that run deep. What will it take to break the stereotypes of old in what should be a regional powerhouse? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the coup in Guinea. With us from Conakry, Boussouriou Diallo, president of the advocacy group COGEDEV, the Consortium of Association of Young for the Defense of the Victims of Violence in Guinea. Thank you for speaking with us.
Yeah, thank you too. You're welcome.
From Dakar, Gilles Yabi, founder of Wati, the citizen think tank of West Africa. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And we're joined here by Nyagale Bagayoko, head of the African Security Sector Network. Thank you for joining us. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. It wasn't your average cabinet meeting a short while ago. On the day after the coup, civil servants, top civil servants, ordered to work while government ministers and the presidents of institutions were in a tent outside Parliament. They were summoned. All of those that didn't show up could be liable for treason and told they couldn't leave the country. However, the head of the junta promising them no witch hunts. In the capital, where there's been joy in opposition strongholds, tinged with the question of how long the soldiers will stick around this time. Mario Sofos has more.
A day after the ousting of Guinea's president, Alpha Conde, the streets of the capital, Conakry, were under heavy patrol by soldiers. On Sunday, the military junta said that land and air borders had been closed, but on Monday announced that air frontiers had been reopened.
Le CNRD. We are announcing the reopening of air borders and the resumption of commercial and humanitarian flights only.
Members of the ousted government are barred from leaving the country and have been ordered to hand back their official vehicles. They were also summoned to a meeting at the Guinean parliament on Monday. The junta warns that any refusal to attend would be considered an act of rebellion and have called on Alpha Conde's security detail to turn themselves in.
Les ex-personnel. The CNRD is ordering ex-presidential security personnel to join the rapid intervention group of KM36 immediately. Faute de quoi? Otherwise, a sweep search will be made throughout the country.
After Monday's meeting, Guinea's military junta announced the dissolution of the government and the National Assembly and have promised to set up a government of national unity. They have vowed not to pursue a witch hunt against the former government. Alpha Conde was re-elected for a third presidential term last October, following the introduction of constitutional reform that was roundly criticised by his opponents.
What was your reaction, Boussouriou Diallo, when you heard there was a coup underway?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Boussouriou Diallo. I'm a human rights defender in Guinea. I'm the executive secretary of COGEDEV. It's a youth organization that we created after the 28th September events in 2009 that happened at the Guinea at the Conakry Stadium. And during that period, as you know, we have lost in Guinea many people. You know, up to now we have that event in our memory. And what happened yesterday in Guinea, for me, it's something that was expected. You know, it was expected because we live in a failed state in Guinea. Since Mr. Conde has decided with his government and his supporter to change the old constitution that has been settled by the by the CNT in 2010 or in 2011. But we have in our memory the role of our army in the political system in Guinea. And we hope that the new engagement that has been taken by the Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya will not be the same like the former junta leader that is Camara, because we remember after the death of Lansana Conde, the army also took the power and they promised to lead the country in the democracy system. But after some months, we realized that their promises was not true, you know. And what happened in 2009 when the massacre of 155 people, you know, took place at the Guinea Stadium. And now we have not seen, you know, clearly where we are going on.
Yeah,
and,
it's early days. It's early days so far. Let me bring in Gilles Yabi on this. There failed, as you just heard from Boussouliou Diallo. Guinea has well chronicled failed promises from both civilian and military leaders. Same for you? You weren't that surprised this coup happened?
Yeah, well, no, I wasn't that surprised. I think Mr. Diallo clearly, said that the conditions were ripe to have basically anything in Guinea happening, including a military coup. I would say the style of governance of President Alpha Conde, and also specifically his decision to run for a third term, that was a violation of the constitution and could actually be considered also as a coup. So basically, this created a situation of tensions that give always the pretext, the possibility for any military leaders to decide at one point to seize power without a lot of reaction. We can see that actually in most part of the city of Conakry, people were demonstrating in favor of the ousting of President Alpha Conde. But I think Mr. Diallo also said a second thing that was that I think is extremely important. The fact that you have the condition for a coup to happen doesn't mean that those who are behind the coup now are necessarily defenders of democracy. It is too early to know what are the real intentions of the military leaders that are in place, and I think that is the most important question now, is how to make sure that this time we have a real transition towards something that looks like a democratic system.
Yeah, there is that promise of a swift transition. And let's talk a little bit about the new man in charge. Seems like it's the classic I'm not fired, you're fired kind of coup that Mali's had, that in a more distant past Ghana has seen. Mamadi Doumbouya shooting to prominence as head of Alpha Conde's special commando unit within the army, the GPS. Conde, who'd reportedly grown wary of that GPS's increasing autonomy. Sharon Gaffney has more.
Unknown to his compatriots when he first appeared on national television, Mamadi Doumbouya is described as discreet. Since 2018, the Lieutenant Colonel has headed Guinea's Special Forces, an elite unit that leads the fight against terrorism. It was created by the president he deposed, Alpha Conde. Draped with his country's flag, Doumbouya told France 24 he was committed to a smooth transition of power.
It's our duty to save the country and bring the Ghanaian people together. We will put a system in place for all of the people to come together, because a political system that is not inclusive is a system that is not based on peace.
Before leading the Special Forces, he served in the French Foreign Legion. He also trained at a senior military academy in Paris.
He is someone with a lot of experience. He led several operations in Afghanistan. We can say that he's ready to hit the ground running.
Observers say the success of the military coup can be explained by the significant number of opponents to the rule of President Conde in the ranks of the army and among the general population.
So, Nyagale Bagayoko, the Twitter sphere is alight because here, you have French-trained, a foreign legionnaire who served in places like Afghanistan, the Central African Republic. Just because he was in the French Foreign Legion doesn't mean that he's France's man.
No, Absolutely not. It's very important not to make confusion between the places where people have been trained, because most of the officers in African armies have been trained abroad. And fortunately, they are not all committed in this kind of seizure of power. But what is sure is, when we just heard in the reportage, it is not possible to only focus on the operational capabilities of the armed forces, and especially as regards the special forces. It is important to set up oversight and control strict mechanisms, including civilians, which could act to prevent this kind of event. But today, and including when you can see that one of the international strategy to fight terrorism in the Sahel, for instance, with the Takuba force, or with the newly taken decision by Burkina Faso authority to create a new special force unit, we have to be very, very careful, because, for instance, in Burkina Faso, you have some provisions which are considering that those people from the special forces have not to be prosecuted in any case. So be aware that reinforcing the professionalism of armed forces is not only about fighting. It is also about governance, it is also about human rights, and it is also about respecting civilian frameworks and constitutions.
And do you feel as though those who train those West African armies have gotten better at it? When you see those coups that have recently happened in Chad and in Mali?
I think that more broadly, there is, of course, a big problem with military cooperation, because we are all the time told, for instance, as regards Mali, that it already has been 8 years that soldiers have been trained. But in fact, it's been more than 40 years that French, Americans, and other bilateral partners have been training all those military apparatuses. And we can see that they always been very unstable and very untrue to real democracy.
Giliabi, what do you make of Colonel Doumbouya?
Well, I think again it is too early to have to form an opinion on the intentions of Colonel Doumbouya. I would say that I have no souvenir of a military leader who made a coup and announced that he would not be fighting for democracy and a quick return to civilian rule. So I don't think that the declarations are extremely important. I think we need to wait and see what will happen, and also to have probably more information on the circumstances of the coup. There is a possibility also that it is, seeing that the power of Alpha Conde was extremely weak, there is also a possibility that people actually close to Conde and to the system in place wanted to make sure that they keep control. So I think all the options are still open. But I think what in my opinion is more important than the personality of Colonel Doumbouya is to take into account the political history of Guinea. I think we should not generalize too much. We have both in Mali and Guinea former head of special forces now making coup. That's true, but in both countries, we also have a very specific political and security situation. So I would not necessarily, generalize about other countries in the region, but I would say that in Guinea in particular, you have a history of a very disorganized military. President Conde actually made personally pilots the reform of the security forces in the country. It might be actually one of the area where a lot of people think that he made not a so bad job. And having worked personally on Guinea during the last years of Lansana Conde, I can say that the state of the military in Guinea has always been very problematic, and actually they are a bit more organized now than they were before. But of course, we can also see that the fact that we are using special forces to protect the president and not to fight against terrorism, of course, we are not surprised to see now special forces commanders taking power.
Boussoya Diallo, we had a statement from the French Foreign Ministry earlier saying it was aligning itself with what the regional leaders in the body ECOWAS would decide, that they're in consultations. What are you expecting from France and from neighboring countries at this point?
Yeah, you know, it's normal for France or other countries to condemn the coup that happened in Guinea. But, you know, as a civil society activist, a bit of shame because during our fight against the changing of the constitution, the French government, you know, was here, and also the American government was here, the UN was here, the ECOWAS people had supported Mr. Conde, the African Union has supported Mr. Conde, you know. So now what we expected from this organization and this country is just to give us time, you know, to make some reforms that we need to progress, because in Guinea, we don't need to come back again, you know. We have lost many times during these 10 past years. We have lost many people. Many children have been killed in this country. We don't have justice, you know. The reform of the security forces that happened, you know, under the UN support, you know, it's a failed reform. So now we need to have a new army, as Mr. Mamadi Doumbouya said yesterday. You know, we need an army which is not dominated by the politics, you know.
Excuse me, is that possible in a country like Guinea where,
exactly,
you know, ethnic tensions were very rife in 2010 and 2015?
We don't want international community to manipulate our army. You know, we know that sometimes they support some reforms, they gave us money, but they expect more from our army. Normally, the Guinea army must be under control of the civilian. Is that we need in this country, you know? And, you know, if you see what happened, you know, there's times it could not happen if the international community has accepted to hear our voices. If they have accepted to support the civil society, the FNDC, and some other organization, you know, what happened cannot happen. But now we need reforms, and we want them to let Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya to have the time, the necessary time to change the things. And we also, as a human rights defenders, we need justice for the victims. You know, we need justice for the victims.
Victims dating all the way back to 2009. Boussoya, I'm going to have to interrupt you very briefly because we have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. The dust has yet to settle on a coup in Guinea. The president of 11 years, Alpha Conde, forced out by a junta led by a special unit that had been put in place to fight terror groups. Joining us from Conakry, human rights activist Boussoya Diallo of the consortium COGEVED. Also with us, Gilles Yaby, founder of the Wathi Citizen Think Tank. And we are with Nyagale Bagayoko, head of the African Security Sector Network. Welcome back to all of you. We talked just a moment ago about who the new strongman is in charge is. Let's talk a second about the man who's been deposed. In a previous life, Alpha Conde had braved prison, a long exile in France. He was considered throughout the continent as a hero of opposition movements. Then he came to power, the first time that it was a civilian vote since Guinea got its independence in 1958, and his decision in 2010 to extend term limits.
I'd like to point out that term limits were first implemented because heads of state stayed in power for a long time and they didn't know. That's why we called a national convention to bring change. This was not a dogmatic decision. This was something consensual. It's not about being president for life.
Gilles Gabi, you said just before the break how that also can be considered a coup, what he did with that lifting of term limits.
Yes, indeed. I think we were many analysts and observers of the region to alert last year on the risk of more and more tensions and violence, both in Guinea and in Ivory Coast, when President Ouattara also decided to run for a third term. And I think the analysis was quite clear on the fact that given the polarization of the society, the polarization of the politics in Guinea in particular, and the fact again that you had a constitution with two mandates of 5 years each, and clearly the decision to change the constitution to keep actually the same limitation, but just to argue that because it is a new constitution, the 10 years that President Alpha Conde already spent in power did not count anymore. That was the kind of manipulation that we saw in many countries of the continent, and we knew, and Alpha Conde knew very well that that would be a dangerous path for the country.
Why did he, Gilles, why did he do it? Because, again, Conde was this man who fought for the rule of law. Why did he do it?
Well, to be really honest, I wrote a paper last year, and I was saying that actually trying to understand the personalities of leaders, I don't think that is the best use of our time. Actually, I think that in the same kind of governance system in place in many countries, not only in the continent, but in the world, you would have leaders trying to stay in power if you don't have institutions, if you have some economic conditions that make the state so powerful and political power so, I would say linked to economic power. And my point is that the governance system is so personalized that the president is extremely powerful. And when he decided, for example, to run for a third term in Guinea, you had the support of a lot of people within, of course, his regime, and you also have the support of some external players, to be very clear about it. So that means that when you have such concentration of power and you have economic power linked to the fact that you are close to the one who is at the head of the country, it is quite easy actually to have this kind of decision by the president to run, because he made a calculation and he realized that he could live with it and he could be successful. And that's actually why I think at least some leaders might understand that this kind of calculation might be successful in the short term, but in the midterm, it can be extremely disastrous for themselves.
Very briefly, Boussoria Diallo, you said something at the end of part one about how France condoned Conde lifting those term limits. We read an interview late last year with the magazine ZNfx3Yv9Frc, in which the French president Emmanuel Macron has some sharp words for Alpha Conde. The word here in Paris was that they weren't on the best of terms.
Yeah, really, that's true. Mr. Macron did it. But after some months or so, the French government has changed, its position on the view of the Guinea government, particularly to Mr. Conde, But as I was saying, the problem now we are facing on is our future, So we know our problems, and also we don't want any other country to come and impose Guinea people a president, because what happened in 2010, we know that, we have got, an election that happened in the second round, 4 months, after the first round, This is the first time that happened in Africa. So now we need the Guinea people to be free to elect their own president. We need to have that time, and to make our own decision. That time, Mr. Mamadi Doumbouya has taken some engagement, we are observing, and we hope that he will be the same people in the facing by his position, and he will never change, But as I was saying, we want all these people who have been involved by killing people, during the political demonstration, during the social demonstration. We want those people to be in jail. We don't want them to be in freedom. We want them to respond for the action they have done to our countries, you know. And also we want Mr. Mamadi Doumbouya to free all the activists. It is very important. This morning I was at the prison of Conakry. We were expecting that many of human rights defenders, many activists will get their freedom today, but unfortunately maybe tomorrow, we don't know.
It hasn't happened yet. Your reaction,
No.
Yagale Bakayoko, when you hear Boussoyou Diallo say, give the junta leader time?
What is very interesting, I think, is the growing lack of trust that local actors are showing toward international community. And that's true that in the case of Africa, for instance, I think that the African Union has created a very dangerous precedent after the death of President Déby, when no sanction in Chad, when no sanctions were really taken against the new junta, led by the own son of former President Déby, and this paved the way for other coup attempt, at least. And just a few weeks after, we saw the second coup happening in Mali in May, and the reaction of the ECOWAS was very, very weak, with no very strong sanction either. And today we can see that all the conflict prevention and management mechanism which have been set up by all those multilateral African organizations, the AU, or for instance the protocol for democracy and governance by ECOWAS, are nonsense, because what can those institutions do when they are more or less validating constitutional coup, when saying nothing, when leaders are running for third terms? And what can they say when there is a military coup? So we can see that the international African system is in crisis, but also the international one, because as our colleague in Guinea was saying, the security sector reform process, which has been launched by President Conde, has been strongly supported by the UNDP, the United Nations Development Agency, for years. And this also is raising a lot of questions, not about the intentions of the UN, of course, but about the kind of tools which are used to proceed with the reforms.
All right, interesting how it's a tough one, isn't it? Because if you support the reforms and then the people who get the support turn against the civilian leadership...
That's really the question today. What about the tools which are internationally validated to reform the military?
And do you agree with Gilles Gaby when he says that what Alpha Conde did in 2020, lifting term limits, that's also a coup?
It is also a coup, of course. It is a civilian coup, but it is also a coup. And there has been others in the region.
All right. In the case, there isn't one size fits all when it comes to Africa. And we've seen recently that institutions sometimes can be strong, like in Zambia, where the opposition just won. However, there is a problem with that spate of coups. And also the other problem, which is specific to Guinea, but not just, is, again, a rich country with poor people. Bauxite was trading at a 15-year high. Markets spooked by the putsch at the start of trading this Monday. James Mulholland has more on a country that has huge potential that's still untapped.
Nicknamed the Water Tower of West Africa, the Republic of Guinea has 300 kilometers of coastline. It's traversed by more than 1,300 waterways, including the majestic Niger River. Divided into 4 distinct regions, Guinea shares borders with 6 countries. It's a young nation. Of its 13 million inhabitants, more than half are under the age of 25. The Muslim-majority country is composed of several ethnic groups, among them the Malinke, the Fulani and the Susu peoples. On the 2nd of October 1958, the former French colony became the first in sub-Saharan Africa to gain independence from its European rulers. French is widely spoken, but also Malinke, Fulani, Susu and Kapela. There are more than 24 national languages in all. The economy is largely dependent on agriculture and mining, thanks to its mineral-rich subsoil. Guinea's huge bauxite deposits make up a third of the world's reserves. It's also rich in gold and diamond. However, nearly half the population lives under the poverty line. Another sobering statistic concerns female genital mutilation and excision, with 97% of women affected by the procedure, according to UNICEF. This despite a law from the year 2000 banning FGM. Guinea's recent past is also marked by the Ebola virus. On the 6th of December 2013, the hemorrhagic fever was first detected in the southern village of Meliandou before it spread to neighboring Sierra Leone and Liberia. Over 3 years, Ebola killed more than 1,100 people in the region, including 2,500 in Guinea. The country is no stranger to political turmoil. It endured several coups d'etat before Alpha Conde became the first democratically elected president in 2010.
Gilles Gaby, we've been talking about accountability. Let's, for a second here, follow the money, if you will. We saw under Alpha Conde that there were corruption trials taken up. There were old mining contracts that were ripped up, in particular with Benny Steinmetz, the entrepreneur. Now, when you look at this rich country, what's the way going forward?
Well, I think it is good that you have also raised this economic dimension and the fact that Guinea is probably kind of equivalent of DRC, or Democratic Republic of Congo in Central Africa, and you can see that despite the huge resources, you have a kind of huge poverty and extremely bad governance. And the point is that when you don't have a democratic state and you don't even have a strong state in terms of having capacity to do things, including to negotiate contracts, for example, with foreign multinationals, of course, you have a situation where the country and the peoples are not taking advantage of the natural resources, and that is the very damaging situation of Guinea. I'm not sure that we have reason to be already optimistic about the future, because again, you have to build a state, you have to build institutions, you have to build integrity, to have people who are ready to defend the common interest of the country and not only their own pockets. That's not easy. And I think, let's be also very clear, there is an external dimension of all of politics, because politics means also access to these natural resources. And so in the current situation, of course, all the players that are important in Guinea, including Russia, China, are looking, and probably those who are not present might also be looking, seeing this as a political opportunity, maybe to have new options also to tap natural resources in the country. And I think the only response to that is the need for the civil society of the country to be united and to have a strategy.
Boussoria Diallo, what we've seen in the past, in the case of Guinea, is a long history that's been fraught with the former colonial power and contracts that change according to who's in power. What's your thoughts about, this bauxite, which, by the way, is probably in everybody's kitchen in the world, because it's the world's second largest producer of bauxite, the key ingredient for aluminum. What's your thoughts on how to better manage Guinea's riches?
It is a great question that, the new authorities and the future government of Guinea should answer. But when Mr. Conde came on the power, he came with a project, to amend or to change the mining code, So what we see in his program, Mr. Conde has not, a governance system that can increase, the life of the Guinean people. So now, if you see the condition of the living condition of the young generation, in these regions where you have some bauxite, it is very disappointed. You see, but we expected that this thing should change. We have many mining resources like Congo, like Zambia, but up to now we have not realized, what we can do to manage these resources for the benefits of our country. Mr. Conde has developed business in the mining sector. We don't need a business sector. We need an economic program. you know. So Mr. Conde has chased many investors in this country. You know, many of them have traveled to Sierra Leone, to Liberia, to Senegal, and to other countries. You know, they left Guinea. You know, so now we are in a situation that we cannot explain. You see, and that's why we think that we need time. We need to take our time to change this situation and to move forward now.
You need to wean yourself off an economy that's dependent on the extraction of raw materials. It accounts for something like 60% of the country's riches, and most people are in agriculture. They have nothing to do with the mining sector, right?
Absolutely, but it is the same problems in many African countries, and I think that the comparison with the Central African Republic is very, very relevant, because you have the same kind of bad governance and also the same kind of rivalries between local elites who are competing to get access to natural resources, which in fact are not really at the core of the development of the country. And investment in agriculture and other more productive sectors should be also a solution to be envisioned.
Gilles, does Guinea's sovereignty depend on who it does business with? Half of that bauxite is exported to China. We've seen in past years how the president, Alpha Conde, turned more and more towards countries like Turkey, Russia, and China for deals in many sectors. What does Guinea do?
Yes, again, we live in a global world, and it is very clear that any power that will come into Guinea will have to deal with all the same kind of investors, and also behind the investors, also the country that have the most interest in the resources of the country. So again, the only response is to make sure that you have a legitimate government that is that can be accountable to the population, and for that you need a strong civil society, but you also need to build capacity. I think that we should not forget again the issue of time, the fact that when we waste, in the Guinea, you lost all opportunities to make some reforms and to advance the country in terms of education, in terms of the public administration. When you don't do that, of course you will have to start with that. So it means that unfortunately Guinea will remain an exporter of raw material for some time to come, but everyone knows that that is not the way out of poverty and the way for modernization of our economies in the region. I fully agree with what Nyagale Bakayoko just said about also investing in agriculture, investing in all over sectors of economy that produce more jobs for the youth of the country.
Boussoyou Diallo, we're out of time, but before we go, let me just ask you again. You were saying how you were hoping this Monday there would be the release of detained activists who'd been held under Alpha Conde. Are you in negotiations with the new authorities? What's the situation with that?
No, we are not negotiating that, because we think that there's people who have been arrested. They have been there because of Mr. Alpha Conde. They did nothing wrong. And this morning we were there discussing, because yesterday Mamadi Doumbouya has promised to free all these people, all these political or activities who have been arrested under Alpha Conde authorities. But when we came at the prison, the new authorities has not sent a letter to give the free how to say that the free card, to make them free. So we are all up to now discussing with the penitentiary administration, and we think that tomorrow, inshallah, they will there are 400 people who have been arrested. We think that tomorrow we will get them outside of the prison. And we also are expecting that what happened in the past will not come back again. We need to move forward and to change this situation in our country, because we You know, we expected more from our political leaders. I'm young. I know what the Guinean young people expected from their intellect. I know what they expect from their political leaders. Now, we don't want to live in a country where we have all these resources, but we are living under poverty. We need to move forward.
Need
and
to move
change.
forward.
We need education. We need medical health. We need many, many, many things. We need job also. We don't want to go and die in the Mediterranean. We want young people of Guinea to stay in their own
prospects
country,
at home.
to realize
Diallo,
their
unfortunately,
dream.
we're running short on time, but I want to thank you so much for joining us from Conakry. I want to thank Gilles Yabi in Dakar, Nyagale Bagayoko. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24.
Thank you.